I interviewed and met with 4 potential justices of our great Supreme Court. I'll be meeting with 2 or 3 more.
All right, so that was Donald Trump saying that he talked with potential Supreme Court nominees today. As this fight gets underway fast, Trump saying he'll announce the pick a week from today, but already threats of a revolt from a key Republican senator, Susan Collins, a moderate, who says she supports Roe versus Wade, drawing a line in the sand on that single issue.
A candidate for this important position who would overturn Roe v. Wade would not be acceptable to me, because that would indicate an activist agenda that I don't want to see a judge have.
All right, so Democrats trying to enlist Collins as a potential defector who can help them block Trump's pick. Now, Trump saying this about an abortion litmus test.
Are you going to ask your nominees beforehand how they might vote on Roe versus Wade?
Well, that's a big one, and probably not. They're all saying, don't do that, you don't do that, you shouldn't do that, but I'm putting conservative people on.
All right, so that's what Trump is saying now. But during the campaign, Trump was explicit about what he would want from Supreme Court justices. Watch this.
Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court.
All right, joining me now, former Congresswoman Donna Edwards, Democrat from Maryland, and former Hillary Clinton campaign advisor Jess McIntosh. Great to have you guys with us. Congresswoman, if I may begin with you, do you have any doubt where Trump's nominees will stand on the issue of Roe versus Wade when you hear what he was saying as a candidate and what he said in that interview, and knowing that some of his nominees are being vetted by organizations like the Federalist Society?
Well, we know that most of his nominees are being vetted by the Federalist Society. They already know the answer to that question, and that's the reason that President Trump doesn't have to answer the question. And so let's be really clear here. And I want to make sure that Susan Collins, of course, needs to know that that line in the sand has to be clearer, which is why I believe that there has to be an inside and outside strategy so that we can make sure to shore up Susan Collins and maybe a potential other, maybe Senator Murkowski, on this question. But no doubt about it, those nominees have already been vetted for where they are in Roe v. Wade, and no doubt about it, they will overturn Roe v. Wade, and we can't accept that.
Congresswoman, what would be the outside or inside strategy that you refer to that need to happen to shore up somebody like Susan Collins?
Well, I think there are several things. One, I think the women of Maine need to speak up, and the people of Maine speak up to Susan Collins. I mean, she values very deeply what the people of her state care about, as well as around the country. And I think one of the ways to do that is to do what was done, frankly, with the Affordable Care Act. We didn't just sit around and wait for Senate procedure. We took to the streets. We made our voices heard. We visited offices. All of that outside strategy needs to take place right now. And on the inside, monkey up the works. I mean, Democrats need to be, I think, a little bit more aggressive here. I mean, I've heard them say things like, you know, we'll figure out what the procedure is. We don't have a lot of tools. I don't buy that at all. There are tools that are available to Democrats. They can jam up the works in the Senate, and they really, frankly, should do this until they have clarity on a consensus nominee that is not going to overturn more than 40 years of precedent.
Jess, I see your head. I see you shaking your head in agreement there.
Yes.
So I assume you're agreeing with what the Congresswoman, former Congresswoman.
And in fact, I would feel a lot better about the likelihood of that happening if former Congresswoman Donna Edwards was sitting in the Senate right now. I wish that she were there to be a part of that fight. I think Democrats need to hold very, very strong, and so do the women Republicans who have shown movement on this issue, and for 3 reasons. One, they held up Merrick Garland. We have the McConnell rule that says now you can't confirm a Supreme Court justice this close to an election. The people deserve to be heard. They made the rule. They should get to own it. We should wait until November. The second one is we have a president who is currently under investigation for possibly colluding with a foreign adversary to take the White House. That means he shouldn't get to pack the court for a generation. Somebody who is there by untoward means shouldn't be in charge of a generation of this important policy. And third, if we overturn Roe v. Wade, American women will die. That's not hyperbolic. We know what happens. We know what happens when abortion stops being legal. Women will continue to seek them, and they will no longer be able to do them safely.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. And if we say that, large crowds of women go out into a state like Maine, put pressure on Susan Collins to stick to her guns, so to speak, what happens if large crowds show up in West Virginia against a Democrat like Joe Manchin and put pressure on him?
You're just not going to see that. Roe v. Wade, abortion is one of the least controversial issues in the country.
Right.
You wouldn't know it from the media, and you wouldn't know it from Republicans, but 7 in 10 Americans want Roe v. Wade to stay exactly where it is. You don't get those kinds of numbers with just the Democrats being in favor of it. So the idea that somehow Republicans are going to mobilize millions of people to say, yes, we're done with the right to an abortion, we don't want it anymore, is just not going to be borne out.
Congresswoman, let me play you this soundbite from Senator Maria Cantwell. She had some very strong words warning Democrats. Take a listen.
I think that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle know that this vote could be one of the key votes of their entire career. And they know that no matter what spin comes out of the White House, if they vote for somebody who's going to change precedent, it could be a career-ending move.
Do you agree with that, Congresswoman, that this could be a career-ending move for anyone who goes with a pick that changes precedent?
I absolutely agree with that, and especially for Democrats, because keep in mind that even in these states that are, red states with blue senators, those states depend on voters like me to go out and vote for them, and that will simply not happen. This is a mobilizing moment. The president has already said that he wants to appoint somebody who could be on the court for 40 years, not even just a generation, a couple of generations. And so this is a career-defining vote, and I think that we need to make it clear from the outside that that is what we believe as well.
Let me play you this soundbite from Susan Collins, because she's obviously come out and said that she doesn't want an activist judge who overturns precedent. Take a listen to this, what she said about Neil Gorsuch.
Don't you think he's probably going to vote to overturn Roe versus Wade if given the chance?
I actually don't. I had a very long discussion with Justice Gorsuch in my office, and he pointed out to me that he is a co-author of a whole book on precedent.
But interestingly enough, that very same Justice Gorsuch, he was part of the decision that broke with precedent on a vote on unions that was in place for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So how is there a fail-safe mechanism that people like Susan Collins and others can vet or to predetermine that a judge is not going to say one thing behind closed doors and then go do something else on the bench?
No, of course not. And her optimism about Neil Gorsuch is entirely unfounded. He was vetted by the Federalist Society. The Federalist Society is a hardline conservative group that will not approve any nominee who isn't committed to overturning Roe v. Wade. So I'm sorry that he was able to obfuscate in her chambers when they had their one-on-one meeting, but based on his decisions on this court, he is clearly capable of being an activist judge, and I have no hope that we don't overturn Roe if Trump is allowed to add one more.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.